Your credit card bill may look overly complicated, and that's because it kinda is. How much you owe, how much should you pay, and what even is the best day to pay your card? Well, the truth is there's actually two really good days to pay your credit card bill, as well as one horrible day you should completely avoid. With that said, in order to know what the best day to pay your bill is, you actually have to understand how your bill works. As you might know, when you use your credit card, you have something called a credit limit, which is the amount of money available for you to borrow, and once you borrow that money from the bank, you have to pay it back. However, the weird thing about your credit card is that even though you have to pay that money back, you can still keep borrowing from your total credit limit. So to better understand, let's look at an actual bill, and you'll see that on any statement, you have a couple different terms, the first of two being your previous balance and your new balance, sometimes also called your current balance. Your new balance is the amount of money that you are currently spending in this statement period. So for example, if you made a transaction today, that's part of your new balance, and any transactions you make in this new statement period are part of that balance. Your statement period is normally about a month long and is marked by your closing date. Once your statement period is closed, your new balance will then change into your previous balance, and your previous balance is now what you owe from all of the money that you spent in that last statement period. So to keep this simple, the money that you spent this month is your new balance. Once the statement period is over, it then becomes the previous balance, and then once it becomes the previous balance, that is now the money that you owe to the bank of what you spent. But how does the bank determine what you owe and when a statement period closes? Well, that's because, like I mentioned before, the statement period is marked by the closing date. The closing date marks the end of each statement period. The confusing thing though is that while this may mark the end of the closing period, it doesn't mark when your bill is actually due, and isn't necessarily even the best day to pay. So when is the best day to pay? Well, you'll see a couple different dates on your statement, and one of the most important ones to note is the payment due date. This is the day that your actual payment for the last statement period is due. And when looking at a closing statement, you'll see that the closing date and payment due date are two very different dates. And that's because in order to give customers time to actually pay their bill, credit card companies provide what's called a grace period, allowing you to pay off your balance anytime after they've determined the actual balance and when they expect to receive payment. So when looking back at the current balance and previous balance, how much do you pay and what's the actual amount you should pay? Well, besides for the new balance and the previous balance, you'll see what's called your minimum payment. The minimum payment is the amount of money the credit card company requires that you pay in order to continue using their services. With that said, one thing you may notice about the minimum payment is that it's a lot lower than your previous balance. And that's because credit card companies don't need you to pay off your balance in full in order for you to keep using them. But one thing you should know is that you should never just pay the minimum balance, and there are two reasons why. With the first being interest. See, because if you didn't know, when you don't pay your credit card bill off in full and you only make the minimum payment, you're charged interest on that remaining balance. So let's say you have a credit card where your credit limit is $1,000 and you now owe $300 for your last statement period. If your minimum payment was only $30 and you didn't pay the rest of the $270 off, you'd be charged interest on that remaining balance. You may see the interest on your bill or written in terms as APR. And with many credit cards, your APR ranges from around 20 to 30% per year. With that said, you might be saying to yourself, well, Jabari, if it's 20 to 30% per year, how are they charging me every month the statement isn't paid off in full? And that's because the APR is actually divided up into 365 days and then charged a little bit each day the bill isn't paid in full. So by not paying your credit card bill in full or paying just the minimum payment, you're effectively guaranteeing that you're going to have a 20 to 30% negative return on your money. However, just because you have a credit card doesn't mean that you have to pay any interest at all. As a matter of fact, a standard for you should be to never pay any credit card interest ever. And you can simply do this by making sure that your credit card bill is always paid in full. With that said, the second reason why you don't only want to pay the minimum payment on your credit card bill is because of the fact that it will keep your credit utilization high. Now, your credit utilization is important to know because it factors into about 30% of your credit score. And the higher your credit utilization, the lower your credit score will be. With that said, your credit utilization is the percentage of credit that you're actually using of your overall credit limit. So in that same example where you have a credit limit of $1,000, when you spent $300 and made a minimum payment of $30, the amount you still owe to the credit card company is $270, therefore making your credit utilization 27%, 270 over $1,000. However, when you pay off your credit card bill in full, your credit utilization should drop down to about 0%. because you're using $0 of the full $1,000 credit limit. Now, with that said, as I've mentioned, there are two best days and one day to avoid when it comes to paying your credit card bill, with the first day being before your actual closing date. And the reason for this is because it lowers your credit utilization, because remember, the amount that you have as a balance is recorded on your closing date, and as long as you pay in full will show an on-time payment, helping your overall credit score and ensuring that you don't pay any interest. However, paying it before the statement closing date may not work for some people, which is why you have the second day and the most common day, which is paying anytime before your payment due date and after your statement closing date. And the reason why this works and isn't the one day to avoid is because when you pay in the grace period, your credit card company will recognize anything above the minimum payment as an on-time payment. And if you pay your previous balance in full or on the payment due date, your credit card company won't charge you any interest. Now, with that said, there is a common myth that you should leave a balance on your credit card to show them that you're using that card, and that by leaving a balance and then making payments is how you build a good credit history. But that's completely untrue, because when you pay your credit card off and your previous balance drops to zero, whether it's zero this month, the next month, or the month after that, credit card companies mark each one of those statement periods as on-time payments. So don't be fooled there. Now, with that said, there is still one day to avoid paying your credit card bill, which will cause your credit score to drop. It's a time where they'll charge you interest and late fees, and overall just leads to bad financial habits. And this day is any day after your payment due date. And while you might think, well, I could just be late on one payment, let me reassure you that even missing one payment could drop your score by hundreds of points. So try as hard as possible to make sure you don't find yourself in this situation. And if you ever get to the point where you even think you might be late and you don't have enough money to make your minimum payment, I suggest contacting a credit card company and seeing if they can lower the credit card payment for just this period. But I'm sure this won't happen to you because you're subscribed. With that said, that brings me to something that you've got to start understanding. There are certain things you truly want to avoid when trying to improve your credit score. Click here to learn 6 of the biggest credit card mistakes you should avoid, and see you in that video. Bye.